Hello, Blazor fans. Welcome back to another episode of Blazor State Has Changed. We're going to have a good show today. We're going to do some more Azure ML, or sorry, not Azure, ML.NET integration with Blazor. And we got some news items to cover at the top of the show here. So looking forward to it. Welcome back, several folks that are regulars. I see you guys in the chat room. Welcome back. Goran, welcome back to the show. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. We've got a couple projects to mention here in the news, and or an article and a project and a podcast to mention here in the news. So let's go ahead and jump over to a live view of my screen so I can share this stuff with you. I spotted this one the other day on Twitter. I'm not sure how to pronounce the person's name. I think it's clever spelling of Shannon, maybe, or it is Channon. But they have a project called Pretty Code, which gives you a way of writing code samples in your Blazor projects, so they display nicely in the browser. So there's a lot of these things in JavaScript these days, but those don't always play well with Blazor applications because we're trying not to use JavaScript for the most part, and you have to kind of tap into the right lifecycle methods and things to make those JavaScript plugins highlight your code correctly. So here's one that you can use without all that headache. And it looks like it's even got some theming capabilities built in. I haven't really dived into it to see if it's piggybacking on any JavaScript interop or anything like that, but it looks like there's some theme support out of the box. It looks like a pretty cool plugin. So that one is called Pretty Code. I'll paste that in the chat. And I'll make sure I put together a blog post on some of this stuff soon. I know I've gotten behind on my show notes again recently, so I have to get those up and running. Been recording video all week long, been doing shows all week long, and I'm losing time for some of the simple things in life. So I'll try to get those up soon as possible. Another one by Chris Santi. He's got an article almost every week these days talking about using Blazor components in an existing MVC application. And one of the really nice things about this is you can start writing Blazor components and you can use them in your apps that you already have running. So the main thing about this, let's see if I can get down to it here, is this HTML helper that you run called render component async, and you can pass in the type of component and then what parameters you want to spin up with that component. So there's a nice way of doing that. I don't know if they'll come up with a tag helper version of this sooner or later in .NET Core, but it's nice to have that ability there. And Chris writes all about it in his article, so give that a read if that is something that you are interested in working on. I know I am. I know there's a lot of use cases for that. I can't wait to check that out. I was fortunate enough to be on the MS Dev Show a couple weeks back, and that's finally aired. So make sure you check out the show if you haven't heard it already, or share it with your friends. These are some good friends of mine over at the MS Dev Show. I've known them for quite a while. They put on a really good show. I listen to it quite frequently myself. So make sure you share their show, not only mine, but just the MS Dev Show in general. It's a great podcast, especially when you're on the go. So give that a look when you get a chance. That's msdevshow.com. Another quick mention, I didn't quite throw this out in the tweet, but if you're following any of the Telerik stuff, we have released compatibility. This came out about a week ago, but I've been too busy to kind of catch up on this. We've released compatibility with Preview 6 for all of our Telerik UI for Blazor components. We've got all sorts of stuff in here, grids, charts, date inputs, and date pickers, and all that good stuff. So if you haven't checked it out in a while, give it a look. And we're on Preview 6 now, so good stuff there. Let's jump back into our project that we've been working on. What font style am I using on the first tab? if you don't mind me asking, on the first tab, what font style am I using? Steez Kelly, are you talking about Visual Studio or something I had up in the browser? Because the one I just closed, let's see what we've got here. I had, let's see, what did I have open last? I had Telerik.com was open. Are you talking about the fonts on Telerik.com? Oops, I didn't have demos open. I had the product page open. This was one of the last things I had open here. You talking about these fonts in the Blazor page? Let me know. Not sure which one I had open last, but these aren't these aren't fonts that I usually have control over, so I'm not quite sure. We could always do a quick inspect here and take a look. I know one of our corporate fonts is go to three dots. Oh, let's see which one was it? MS Dev Show. See what fonts MS Dev Show is using. So this isn't my podcast, so I'm not quite sure. But we can take a look and see. Actually, computed style probably tells us the quickest. Minecrafter. There we go. Minecrafter. I didn't know that was a font. Didn't know that was a font. Minecrafter. Let's check that out. Minecrafter font from that font. Looks like it is. Yeah, that looks like the one there that they're using. Looks like it might be a freebie. I don't see that it is. Yeah, looks like it's a free to use font, possibly. I don't see anything that says you can't. Usually these things are pay services. You get the fonts from. You'd have to read the. To donate. It's by a donation. Cool. It's a nice one though. It matches really well with their theme on their stuff. I've got some of their swag and. I've got a nice hoodie and stuff with their logo on it. It's good stuff. Good question too. I dig fonts. Like I haven't. When we get into design on BlazePort here, we'll dig into some fonts. I've got some that I like to use on my websites and stuff, and we'll have to play around with what works on here. I've done quite a bit of design work back on some conferences and whatnot, so. When we get to the design portion of this, it should be pretty interesting. I haven't live streamed any design related stuff yet. Let's see here. See if I can pull up something of mine really quick. I got to watch Behance because they have... Actually, let me pull it off screen. I don't want to get taken down or banned because the wrong thing pops up on Behance. There's all types of... art profiles on here, and sometimes those types of art are not friendly for yep good thing I pulled it off screen. Sometimes beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and some people find certain things offensive that may pop up on Behance, so I took it off screen, and it's a good thing I did. There we go. Yeah, so I've done some design stuff before, and this is some of the things that I've worked on, and there's some good, cool fonts in here. These are some good examples of font usage that I've worked with. This was a ticket for a conference that I designed. So I've got some script type fonts and stuff in here. Give it a little old school look. So we'll dive into some of that stuff sooner or later when we start designing the app. So let's take a look here. Last show we were working on integrating this machine learning program or machine learning code base into our program. We have a couple new projects over on the side. I'll zoom in so we could take a look. We've got the web application, the main application. We also have a trip cost service and a trip cost trainer. The trainer trains a machine learning model to to be consumed by the service. So if we look at our service, we have a iTrip cost prediction service that we can inject into our application. And then there's the concrete service type there. And that is all driven by this trip cost trainer. So we feed it data. In our example, we're using taxi fare data to train the model. And it produces a zip file, which is the trained machine learning model. And all of that training is done in program.cs. This is all ml.net. If you were on the last show with me, you went through some learning processes on how to migrate from ml.net 0.11 to 1.1, and that was a headache. They had massive breaking changes between ml.net, the beta, and the RTM. So we got all that fixed. Quick basics of how this works is we give it paths to our CSV files. It runs through a data processing pipeline and produces a model, and it feeds a whole lot of data to the console for us to use to analyze. Excuse me, hiccups. Use to analyze the model, and then it saves it off to a zip file. Once we have that zip file, we can use it in our application. That zip file is loaded from our service. If we look at our service, we'll look at the interface for it here. We need to give it a model path, and then we can call the predict fare. I still have some loose naming changes in here. So this is actually supposed to be a trip, just a trip, not a taxi trip, but a trip. I'm trying to get all the words taxi out of there because it came from a taxi example. We're going to be weeding that taxi information out of this. So this is just going to be a trip that it takes and gives us back the cost of that trip. So got to change this elsewhere. There we go. And one more instance of that guy. Still doing a little cleanup here, you can see. And then once we had this all fixed up, I had a little GitHub issue where the project that we're working on, I'll pull up the, let me pull up the folder for it. We'll do this in File Explorer. I had the Git repository at the web application level. So the git.git folder was here, and it wasn't seeing any of these files underneath of it. So I actually had to move this Git directory up. If you were watching the last bit of my last show, I was trying to figure this out. Ended up just copying the Git repository itself, the .git folder, up a level, and then changing some commits and publishing those changes. So you'll see there is quite a bit of stuff in that GitHub repo. If we go to GitHub and check that out, there are massive amounts of changes in there, and it looks really busy, but we didn't really do that much work. But I did get the GitHub stuff fixed. There was also a lot of SAS files that I pulled out of the Git repo, so you might see that in there as well. And I am working on the feature trip cost ML branch, and we've got, you can see the commits here, where I removed all the vendor CSS from Git. That stuff comes from our dependency management system, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't want to track all that stuff, so I removed all of that. So 90 files that we took out of there, and we don't need to track anymore. And then I moved the Git location as well. So you'll see there's 133 changed files. That's just because they got moved to another directory. So it looks crazy, but really we didn't do that much work. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take advantage of this service and call it into our main application in Blazor. And we should be able to pull in or call that ML service successfully. So I'll show you a couple cool tricks in here once we get started putting this in. I'm trying to see if there's any last stragglers of this taxi verbiage inside of the service here. Don't see any more. So I think this will be good. So let's make sure there's none in the comments real quick. Okay, no comments there. Good. So, and Mr. Magoo's joined us. Hey, Mr. Magoo, how are you doing? Let's do this. Let's commit that last change that I made to GitHub before we get started any further, because I had just changed a little bit of that taxi stuff there. Removed taxi reference. Yeah, not reference, I don't want to say that. Remove taxi text there. So there's a couple little taxi bits left. Get rid of those. All right. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you again, Corey. I remember last show I kept calling you Cody by mistake. I was very tired that day. So welcome to the show, Corey. We're working on ML.NET and we're getting ready to put it into our Blazor server-side application. So we need to first add a reference to this project. So under dependencies, we have a local project we want to reference, and that is going to be the BlazePort trip cost service. We don't need to reference the trainer. The trainer can stand alone now. That doesn't have any bearing on the actual application itself. We will need to do a little trick with that, though. We need to be able to call this service in our application. So we don't need to put anything here. The service is referenced externally, but we do need to create an entry for it in our service container. And the way we'll do that is through services. And we will say services.add scoped. And then we need to inject our service here. And the service is going to be called an let's double check the name here, trip cost prediction service. And if I spelled that right, I can hit Control period and I can enter, and it will import a using statement into that. Now, the trip cost service requires a path. So I need to actually tell the service container how to new this up. So we'll say this requires a new trip cost service, and I need to pass in a model path. Let's see, let's just put some empty quotes here because we need to put a string in that value there. And let me make sure that I've got this text right. Missing something here. Cannot convert from trip cost prediction service to trip cost prediction service. So I'm missing something in my method call here. I'm trying to remember what exactly it is. Let me jump back to a project that I've done before with the same setup. I'm not sure what I typed in wrong here, but I've got another example of it that I can pull the idea from. The original taxi fare project, which this project is available on GitHub as well. Take a look at the server project here, and in startup, and I am missing, I don't know. Taxi fare prediction service. I seem to be calling it correctly. I'm not sure what the issue is here. It can't convert from one type to another, it says. Let's double check here. I am implementing this service and I should be able to call it that way. Or am I doing, did I do this backwards? No. I should be able to add the I whatever and new up a brand new taxi fare service. It should work just fine. Ready. So let's try this. Let's take this line and compare notes very closely. I know I'm doing add singleton here. We could do that as well, but add scope should work too. So I have services, add singleton. It was service. I wasn't using a using statement, but I had taxi fare prediction in the other app. And I was newing up a taxi fare prediction service with my model path. And interestingly enough, I'm getting an error on this one, and it's the same code. Unless there's something with add singleton that scoped is doing differently. I don't think so, though. It should be the same. Let's give that a try. Oh, okay, it is. Add scoped does something different. Scope services, specified type. There's no overload on add scoped. Well, that's interesting. Add scoped doesn't take a parameter. So we have to use add singleton. I guess because add scoped is more generic than add singleton, there's going to only be one per application versus one per instance. Not sure. Scoped is looking for a func. Well, that's okay. So scoped wants it to be a func of system dot okay. Wonder why the two calls are different like that. Let's give the docs a look and see why. See if it says anything. Let's see what it says. I'm just curious on if there's anything in the docs that says why it's registered in that way. Because normally we do this, but we need to set a parameter. It shows using add scoped and add singleton like that, just like we were in our application. But I don't see... That's interesting that it doesn't have any examples of constructing this the other way. So it wants, let's see here, it wants to do a function that takes an iService provider and returns the trip cost service instead. You know what, we will just make this add singleton for now, and I will come back to that later. I'm not going to let that hang me up for now. I know this works just fine. So we'll put the missing semicolon there. And now we have our service. The thing that we need to fill in next is we don't have a model path. And we haven't set up a folder or anything to even have the model within it. Right now, the model is in the trainer, and it is under ML models, under trip cost model. And I want to have control over this. That's probably the right thing there, Super Sniper. Yeah. Because with scoped, it's one per user instance, and with singleton, it is one instance per app. So it has to call it each time. Yep. Makes sense. With the trip cost service, it shouldn't matter. One instance per app should be fine. So we'll actually run with that. So it's not going to be a different prediction service based on user. So it's actually only calling one function and getting a value directly back from it. So don't see any problems there. We'll just keep it that way for now. All right, so we have our ML models. We could give it a path to this other project, which is going to be kind of a hot mess. We're going to have to go dive down into that directory and then find it. And then also when we deploy the application, our trainer won't be necessarily in the same server that the application is in. So we may just deploy our application to a server, and it's not going to have the trainer to go fetch the service from that project. So what we need to do is pull this into a folder inside of our application. So we want to deploy this to the server. So let's create a folder. Let's add a new folder. And we'll call this folder ML models. Just like we had in our trainer. And then what's really neat is I can use libman. Let me see if I can use the GUI to do this with libman. If not, we can do it on inside of the configuration file. So we can do configure a client-side library. And we can say from the file system, let's see if it'll let us. Yeah, there we go. So we want to actually go down a level and then to the trainer. And from ML models in the trainer, we're going to grab the zip file from there, and we can click install. And now libman is going to pull in that file for us and put it inside of this directory here. And I think I misconfigured this. It didn't show up. I put the it defaulted to wwroot lib models. We could put it in there. I'm going to go ahead and move this down a level, though. I'm going to put it right in the main folder of the application instead. So we save that, and it should populate there. It should. And it did not. So let's see why it didn't. Right. Let's see if there's anything in the output window. Failed to restore one. It's probably got something. Destination must be inside the working directory. Let's see. ML models. Okay, there we go. The slash threw it off. That's what it was. And then something threw an exception. We don't really care about that right now. There we go. So there's our trip cost model. So it is now inside of. Corey's learning about libman. So libman, we're using it pretty heavily in our project. We're pulling in, if I expand this out, we are pulling in the Bootstrap SaaS all the source code for the SaaS, and we're just running straight SaaS in this project. So we have a SaaS pipeline there. And then now I've just pulled in a local file from another project in the same directory and plopped that down inside of my project. And then before I get too far along and forget about this, let's jump over to Team Explorer and changes. I don't want to put this zip inside of my Git repo. So I'm actually just going to ignore these local items because those are coming from libman. So we'll let libman take care of those. So I'm not going to pop those into Git. They're already going to be in Git because they're right there. Right, so every time I train this model, I don't want to have to update commit on that GitHub repo. So that is good to go. Now I can find my path and point to it inside of where I newed up the service model. And in order to do that, I need to build the path. So let's set up a variable here. The scoped example. Thank you, Super Sniper. So this would be the scoped version. Thanks to Super Sniper there in the chat room. It would be add scoped, and then it would be our iTrip cost prediction service. And then that lambda expression is get required service. And then our implementation, trip cost prediction service. I'm going to type all that out. There we go. And then we can pass in our model path. So that's a little bit more work, but let's see. Get required service isn't doing anything. Oh no, that does work. Let's see. No, that's not right. Get required service. I did something wrong when I started typing this out. Coordinator. But it's still, let's see, it's still not newing this up the way I need to. We still need to do a new, let's see if this is going to let me do this, trip cost prediction service with a value. And that value is a model path, which is a string, and it's still not happy. No overload takes one argument. So not quite. Yeah, that's still not quite working. Get required service. Doesn't have an overload either. Gets a service type of I-type service provider. They don't take constructor arguments. We'd actually have to use probably autofact then. We can use autofact to get that working if we want to, but singleton is going to work fine. So we need to set up the model path. So string model path equals, we need to set up the model path somehow. I know this gave me a little hang up once, so I'm going to just look back at my reference project again, but I needed to grab the current directory was what I needed last time. So I need to do path, which is under IO, path.combine, and then environment is under system. So control period to get me the references I need for those. And then this is not taxi. This is trip cost model. Trip cost model. And we've got the directories the same. And now we can take our model path and stick it here. Boom. So now we should be able to spin that up. When we call this on a page, we can inject that information. So go to our index page now, and we should be able to say inject a trip cost prediction model or prediction service. We're also going to need a using statement here. See if that does a trick, and it looks like it did. So we'll call in our trip cost service, and now we should be able to use our trip cost service. On init, actually it won't be on init. It will be when we submit a form, which we do not have. So let's temporarily put something in on init. So we need a taxi or a trip form, a trip cost object, because if we call our service, let's just do this temporarily. Trip cost service has a method on it called predict fare. And then predict fare takes a trip. So we need a trip before we can predict anything. Oops, trip. The trip object. I have, I need one more using statement here. Using trip cost. And there we go. So trip cost, trip, trip equals a new trip. And not sure what I was getting a red squiggly mark there for. Still don't have the right assembly reference, eh? Let's give this a look. So I can minimize that now. In our trip cost service data structures, that's why it's a data structure. So trip cost data structure. Services data structures. There we are. There's my object I'm looking for. Now I can new up a trip. And my trip has several values on it. I have a passenger count, which I can set to an integer. I have fare amount is what is going to be predicted, so I don't want to enter that. Rate codes, we'll discuss that later. It's an integer. It identifies what time of day that the trip is taking place. So it's like traffic conditions, weather conditions, all of those things could affect your trip. We don't really have a way to kind of rationalize those through the UI or anything yet. So we're just going to hard code that one in for now. Payment type. Again, we don't have anything set up for this. It's a code, which if we look at our trainer, we can look at the data this was trained on, and in the trainer it's either cache or cred, so we need to have one of those strings available. We'll hard code that one too for now. Not sure how this will affect our app later, but we will deal with it when we come to it. Rate code is also a string, apparently. Rate code is 4. They're integers inside of a string. It's always fun. And then vendors. We have several vendors too, which are also string values. And if we look back at our test data, we have VTS, and there's one more. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's 2 values in there. So we'll go back to here, and we can stub that out. And the distance isn't going to matter, I don't believe. We'll just put 0, or no, sorry, the distance matters greatly. We'll put 2.1. Let's see what that does. And we just need to build out this trip that we're going to take so it can predict the trip. Let's see. It's a float. Need to identify it as such. So We have one passenger at rate code 4 paying cash to the vendor that we will make up a name for, and is going 2.1 miles, which we will then equate to something else later. Like this will be Mars or the moon or something. 2.1 miles to Mars. We'll pretend, right? This is all like fictional app stuff anyway, so we'll figure something out clever and make this nice and fun. So now that we have a trip, we can predict the value of it. Cost equals service. So trip cost service, predict fare, and then we pass in the trip. Like that. So we don't have any of these values on the page. Let's go ahead and just write out the final trip cost just to make sure this works. So anywhere on the page here, we have total price, so we'll go ahead and stick it at the end of total price. Throw a span here at cost. Oops, sorry, that was a local variable I just tried to bind to. So we need to actually make this something at the top level here. And we'll go ahead and make this a string because it's going to end up being a string anyhow. Actually, it's Razor. We don't even need to care about that. I think it's going to come back as a float. Actually, we're getting back an object off of this. We need to get the fair amount out of it. So fair amount will come back, and that is a float. So float total price. We'll change the name of that. Total price. Pop that guy down here. And we have a new subscriber. Bite Me just subscribed with Twitch Prime. Thanks, Bite Me. Nice to see you back. It's been a while since since I saw you out at Star Trek. Nice to see you back on the show. So we've got our trip, and we're going to feed that into our prediction service, and it will predict a fair cost or fair amount, which we are going to call total price. Once we have total price, we can write total price onto the page. So there's our total price. We'll throw it right there, and now we should be able to run the app. And let's hope that everything works as planned and we actually get a price on the page. And, oops, I ran the wrong project. So we're gonna build the model again real quick. So we are building and training the prediction model first. And there's our scatter plot of our distribution of predictions. They're pretty tight along that line. That's what we want to see, is that the values are tight on that line. The ones that are outliers out on the outside edges are bad predictions. We don't want that. So the more clustered they are towards the line, the better. We have a new model. Not any different really from the last one. We didn't change the data, so it's going to be the same model. But what I did wrong is this drop-down up here. This drop-down is all the projects in my solution, and I need the web project, which is BlazePort at the top level. So I'll change that out. And now when I hit run, I'll get my web app instead. So my bad on that one. So we'll run this out. Looks like it's compiling just fine. So that's always good news. Nothing crazy going on today. Let's hope. Let's hope we see a dollar value, which isn't formatted a dollar yet, but a floating point value rendered out right in the UI. And internal service error. Well, that didn't work out well. Cannot provide a value property for trip cost service on type BlazePort pages index. There is no registered service type for trip cost prediction service. Well, I don't know how that could be, because we just went through all the effort to register. I know why it is. Because I forgot the letter I. Super snipers on top of it. It should be trip cost prediction service. One letter off in all the crap that we give JavaScript for missing a comma or semicolon. Shame on us. Shame on us. Look how much a misplaced I can give us problems in a C# application. I will say, though, at least it was an intelligent error that told us at least a general idea of where we could go look. My trip cost service has just failed, though. Trained model is null. So it's saying trained model is null, which means that our model path is probably bad. And I'm not sure how that came about, but we will troubleshoot and see. Yeah, so if this was here, let's do something fun real quick. If this was JavaScript, I'm just going to beat up on JavaScript today. If this was JavaScript, the error would just be there. Oh, it didn't. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that would be our JavaScript error, just undefined. Enough playing around. Let's go see why our model path is bad. So I'll put a breakpoint here when the app starts up. Actually, let's go down one more line. Put it here. The model path will not be built until it hits that line. I am pretty sure that the model path is bad, is why we're getting an error, because if it can't find the model, it's not going to load the model correctly. And let's pull this directory out. So I'm copying this line. I'm going to open up my file explorer here and just paste this in and see if we are hitting the right path. So now I'm confused. Let's see. We're hitting an error on, let's let it continue and blow up again. And it's saying it cannot load the model. Oh, Sarah just dropped into the channel and gifted the hell out of some subscriptions. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah is my coworker and manager. So she has just created a frenzy of subscriptions in the channel. Thank you so much, Sarah. With a big sub sponsorship today. Thank you so much. Sarah is leading the charge on streaming at Telerik, and we are going to build out some more streaming channels, believe it or not. We haven't really announced the details around that yet, but there will be more of us Telerik folks streaming pretty soon. And you get a sub, and you get a sub, and everybody gets a sub. I need to throw the Oprah meme. I don't have these on my Stream Deck. I need the Oprah meme on my my Stream Deck. You get a meme, or you get a meme. You get a sub. You get a sub. We all get a sub. All right, it's still going. Trying to remember how to mute these things. See what you did, Sarah? Let's see. I have an app for this. I will see if I could pull the app up before the sounds stop playing. Let's see. Streamlabs. Streamlabels, I think, has it. Sarah, you're the reason we can't have nice things. I know there's a mute button for this in my my app. Oh, I think they finally stopped. There we go. I don't need to mute it now. All right. So we're troubleshooting an error. Our model is not loading for some reason or another. Let's see. We have our trip was passed in. Let's make sure we have a valid trip. It looks like we do. We have no train model. That is because we're trying to load it. And we have our data view. We have an IO stream. Read timeout. Invalid operation exception. Handles safe file handle through an exception. So there's an exception underneath of after we unwind this, could not find or load assembly ML fast tree. So I have a missing assembly reference, which didn't come up, oddly enough, in the training and exercising of the service. So looks like I need some kind of integration test, which I'm not going to write right now, but eventually to check for stuff like this. But what seems to be missing is a dependency on my service layer. So we'll throw a dependency in here, add, whoops, wrong window. I need to stop running the app. So inside of those exceptions, I'm finding that I need a reference to ml.net fast tree, which is the model or the trainer type that we used to train the model. So it must be trying to load that dynamically and cannot find it. Let's see if that does the trick. So now that that is built, let's do a rebuild all here just to make sure we get the latest bits into our app. I'm crossing my fingers on this one. I think I've got it, but I am not 100% sure if that's going to fix the problem or not. It wasn't what I initially thought. The model's being loaded correctly. It just can't exercise it. Bite Me got bumped off the subs list. Is that what it is? That's great. There we go. That did the trick. So I found it. That was not where I thought it would be. That's not the error I thought I was getting. We were hitting an error on line 21, which was the model trying to load, which my first gut instinct is if something's not loading on a stream, then it is probably the path that's bad because it can't find the file. But what apparently is happening is inside of the ML context, the machine learning context, it is trying to find the model, the type of model that we trained against. And those have been abstracted out by the ML.NET team into their own NuGet packages. And that NuGet package was missing from my service layer. And my service layer didn't throw any kind of errors at first. So I was missing this Microsoft.ml fast tree model type from my NuGet packages, and it didn't care, I guess, when it was running against Trainer because Trainer has it in its NuGet packages. So it was available here, but when I got to my actual web application, it was no longer available. That dependency had to be put in the actual service itself to make itself available to the project. So it looks like we've got it and we're up and running now. So we've got a price of $9.37 as our total price. And we will play with these numbers and make them fit our application's fictional scenario later. So we are building a space travel app, not a taxi app. So what we'll probably end up doing is just putting some numbers in here to fudge around the output. So excuse me while I find my tab again. Let's do some tab bankruptcy as usual and pull up our index page. And when we get our fair amount back out. And what is Visual Studio doing? Now I'm getting underscores everywhere. So that is, you know what? We are going to reboot Visual Studio. Visual Studio seems like it may have hung on the compiler, the Razor compiler. So we're going to reboot the Visual Studios. I know that's the downside of working with hot bits, Corey, is they don't always play along nicely. So that's the bleeding edge. It hurts, but it's fun. So let's see what happens now. And all the things are running in the background. You can see looks like our red squiggles have gone away. And then we have a working page again. So yeah, if you guys see that, you know you've got good working code and it's still throwing errors all over the place. We saw that yellow bar pop up at the top of the screen up here, and it said something about an error. I probably should have grabbed the console log and thrown it over to the .NET team, but I was trying to just get on with the show. So I did not do that. But apparently that service didn't start back up, so the page kept failing. Inside Visual Studio, it probably would have ran fine, but it would have just been a nightmare to edit the page. So I'm just popping in a little white space around here while we look through what we did. And we've got the total price being written out here. And let's fix this up for now. I may change these back to labels later. Let's make this a little more visible to us. We'll put these in, actually, let's keep that. We'll just style it different. Class, H2. This is a little Bootstrap shortcut. We're just going to copy we don't want to semantically make this an H2, but we just want to make it bigger. This is what we're doing. And with Bootstrap, we can just define it that way. So we will do that. And then our total price here, what's really cool about Razor is eventually this will become a string, and we don't have to do toString on it before it is written out in the UI, because it will automatically do that conversion for us. So I can keep this as a float. I don't have to have that a string there. But if I do want to do formatting, I then have to actually format it myself. So if I want to make this dollar value, I can say toString, and I can pass in the formatter that I want to give it. And I always forget these, like what they are off the top of my head, but it is something like D is dollars. And then, of course, there's a lot to do around making those values internationalized or localized properly. Not going to worry about that today. Just try to make it look nice for the show. And we'll get into that in a later step. We're going to kick the can down the road. We do that a lot on this show. We make messes and clean them up later. Refactor, refactor, refactor. So let's see what this looks like. We just bumped up the font a little bit. Our service is working, and then my format did not work. I probably need curly braces on this one. Oh, and I'm going to hit the wrong key. And then if I look like I'm dodging something, I'm trying to look around my microphone to get the right key on the keyboard. Every once in a while, I still need to check back on my hand position here, and I can't quite see what I'm doing. Let's see. Let's check on formats while we're at it. String formats in C#. I always forget these. There are actually, D might be date, so it's a good thing I'm looking and seeing what the format values are. Examples, there's a list somewhere in here. There we go. There's currency. So I am doing this wrong. It should be a C. And then C2, I think, is 2 decimal places. So we can do string format that way. And I'm going to rerun the app because it is already running with the bad string format on it. Then we're writing out our total price. So we've got machine learning and Blazor talking together, living in the same happy project. Take care, Corey. We will see you later. Oh, I did it wrong again. And the quotes must come off. Are the braces maybe? What am I doing wrong here? String.format. I thought you could do toString and I'll make it work that way as well. Am I doing this wrong? Nope. It's toString. ToString and then string format. One of these you don't need the curly braces for, one you do. I can never remember which one's which. Let's stop. Let's do Control F5. It runs a little faster without debugging. We don't need to debug right this second. We're not doing anything that's throwing an error. I'm just fumbling through formatting a string. So let's see. Let's try it this way. String or toString format. And let's see what comes up that way. Standard string formatting. Plus I got, no, I'm still getting that. Why am I getting that? C is currency. Currency's correct, but I'm not getting any formatting back. C2. 0, C2. Value toString, C2. I put in the colon, maybe that's what it is. String, I hit run again too. Run takes forever to spin up the debugger. I just wanted to run it and refresh it. Now I'm going to close it. It's probably going to throw an error this time because I had 2 instances running. The worst part about this is when you're live streaming, you're waiting for these apps to spin. They don't usually take as long when I'm doing dev without the live stream going, I think because of the additional resources the stream takes. So it's not as big of a headache, but there we go. There's our price. And it is $9.38 now. So we have some formatting to make it look better. And we are now displaying our trip price. We don't have trip time yet. We'll have to figure out a way to estimate those times. And then the time until trip will be after it's scheduled, like how long until that, till you leave. So don't have value for those yet either. We probably should start making this page look a little bit nicer soon. One thing that I want to do next, I think, will be moving these data points into an actual database so we can have a little more functionality around how the dropdowns work. What I'd like to do is make more interactive dropdowns that do, what is that called? Cascading effects here. And then we also we're missing some dropdowns as well. So we're going to have a location, and that location is then going to display the list of ports. So we're going to have 4 dropdowns at first, and it will be let's stub these out. So we're going to have pickup location is going to have the location and a port. And the port will also be a drop-down. And the same for destination. It's going to have a port as well. So that'll be something that we work on next. If we look back at our app, we have destinations. We're not pulling any real data yet. And then we have ports. And ports are in a list here as well. It's all just dummy data that's being generated on the fly right now through GenFoo, which is a really cool tool that we talked about on previous shows. And then we also need to make a UI for our trip. So we'll need a form that lets you pick the number of passengers. So we need to put that up here as well. Let's see, label. How many passengers? We'll just put a number 1 there to hold a place for us. What else are we going to need? Payment type and a vendor ID. So we will have we'll have 2 different service providers. And I don't know if we'll call them service providers, but there'll be 2 different kinds of shuttle services here. And there's cash. I think we'll just leave 1 payment type. I don't know if we need to really put 2 there. I don't think anybody's going to pay cash to fly to the moon. I think most people use some kind of credit these days. We could put something fictional in here, maybe. We could say instead of... Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. So instead of cash versus credit for this, we could say they could use points. Maybe there's like frequent flyer miles versus actually be payment method. And maybe it's points or cash or credit. We'll call it miles for now. So maybe you're going to use cash, or you have some miles to cash in. So maybe it'll give you a different value in miles. Who knows? Just an idea. That may not stay, but at least we have a placeholder for it. And then trip distance is something that needs to be calculated at the very least. We need to pull that out of... we need to look at our 2 points and calculate a distance from those 2 points. We don't have a method of doing that yet. I don't know if there's a service we can call or we can mock that will do that. But that won't be in the UI as an input, but at least an output. So let's put it after our dropdowns, because once we select those, then we want to show the distance. Trip distance. Actually, we have that. It's not in the form. It is trip time. We don't have it. So it's not going to be on the form though, but it will be in the data that needs to go to it. And we'll have trip distance. All right. We'll also have some date selections that will have to happen. And when we get to that point, we will also have to decide when we're going to add the telerik UI for Blazor. So we can have nice calendars to pick dates from and whatnot. So that needs to go in our form too. Let's see. Let's put that up front. Dates. We'll just call it dates for now. And then put a generic date there. So we've got some other values that are going to end up going in this form. We initially just had our pickup and drop off location, but we're going to have a lot more pretty soon now that we've got our service added to the project. So we've got our service, and most of those values kind of stubbed out on the form. A couple of these will come from other services, like the rate code will be service-based. We will call something to get the rate code. The user is not going to input the rate code. This one I'm questionable about. The vendor ID is a choice, so that will come from the form. And then the trip distance will be calculated. And our passenger count is from our form. So there we have it. That's where our data is going to come from. So this is getting more interesting. We actually have something that isn't mock data now. We have our trip cost service. We also have a ton of using statements, which we could probably clean up. And another thing I'd like to do with this is make it a code behind type of a scenario, because it helps clean up all of these directives and things. And let's go ahead and do that now. So under pages, I'm going to add a new item. I'm going to add a class file. So we're going to do like a code behind for this index page. So it's going to be index.razor.cs. And if I hit add, that should nest a nice little file right underneath of my Razor page here, Razor component. And now I have a index class, and I can call this index base. And I'm still running. I'm surprised it let me add that. Mr. Magoo taking off as well. See you later, Mr. Magoo. Thanks for joining me for a little bit. So index base is what I'm going to call the base class. This seems to be the standard best practice for now, is the class name and then the suffix of base. And then now that we have this, we can move all of our code out of our code block, and we can put this in the index base class. And in, let's move these side by side. This is usually how I do it. I put them side by side. We'll collapse this guy over here. And now we can see what we're doing a little better. Now we can take all of our using statements and we can plop those on this side over here. And we can pull off all of these nasty old @ symbols that are polluting our application. The inject directives, these need to move. So we will scoot these on down to our index base, and we will put them at the very top here. And I still have red underscores, and that's expected because these actually need to be surrounded by an attribute instead. So they're going to be attribute directives. And these will be inject. And I'm missing a namespace of Microsoft.asp.net.components. And that will allow me to use that inject. Now things should start clearing up a little bit. So my using statements are throwing some issues here. This one is going to be BlazePort.data. I could move that using statement down underneath the namespace here, but I just keep things simple up here. Keep everything up at the top. There we go. So now those have stopped throwing squiggly marks. And so these should as well. Inject is not a valid declaration type for, it needs to be a property. So these are fields right now. We need a getter and setter for these. So we get and set that property. Take that semicolon off the end. And that should go away. And everything is fixed, right, Janescu? It's all better. Let's see. Protected on init. Why am I throwing an error here? On init is... oh, I'm not inheriting yet. Inherit from index base. Did I spell this wrong? Inherits. There we go. And we should be able to remove our code block completely. Everything else now is markup. And let's see, we still have, on init is still not found. Why? Why? Override. Why? Oh, I forgot to inherit from component base on this side. There we go. Now we'll have our on init, and everything is good here, except for to array. We're missing a link statement, is it? Yep. Missing a link statement, and finally, we are good to go. We also need to make these protected. Oh, geez. Protected. There we go. All right. And we have a form that's in here. We'll move that form out later too. This needs to be protected as well. And then everything is good. Everything is good. So now we have our logic separated from our markup, which is the way I like it. So I really like that a lot better. It makes things a lot easier for me to navigate when I start getting a larger component like this. So now I have my form. I have some other outputs, and I should be able to run this. Control F5 to hit that. There we go. Control F5, and now I have a separate code behind file for my index page. And then once this is done, I need to go back and do some commits, and that's working properly. We're going to pretty up this page on the next show, I believe. It's a little ugly right now, but it's just a prototype. It's going to be ugly, but it still could be a better looking prototype. We need to start moving it in that design direction, slowly but surely. We need to do some Git commits. We need to do some Git commits here because this is a lot of work that we're doing and not documenting. So first of all, let's take a look at our service. We did, I actually should have removed and ignored that. I didn't. For now, I'm just going to say that we updated the model. So we need to stage that change. Retrained model. Commit that one. We need to we added a missing dependency here, so we'll stage that. All right, so we can commit the missing dependency we fixed, and then under our BlazePort application, we will save the page changes, but we need to say that we updated libman. So we will stage that and the git ignore together. And for those two, we added libman for ML model. So we're grabbing our machine learning model out of our other project through libman. We'll commit that change, and the rest of the stuff will be, we added our service. So we need to add our service, stage that one. We added the ML service to app. I probably should have, let's stage this one, and I'm going to append that one. I should have included that one in the commit. And then finally, moved index to use code behind. let's say updated instead of moved, so it doesn't sound like we actually moved a file to another directory or something. Now we have a clean Git history. There we go. That feels better. I need to get in a better habit of that. I work on a lot of demo projects that I don't keep good Git habits. So we'll keep these nice and clean for the show. It is heading on 1:30 here on Friday afternoon. I have done 3 live streams this week, and I think we're going to close this one out for the day. Let's take a look at what we have so far and what we've done today. So today we added the machine learning model to, we had it in our solution, but we didn't have it in the web apps. We added it to the web app through a service provider, and we're now able to call that service and successfully get back a predicted price. We added some stubs. So these are all the things that will affect that predicted price. We kind of haphazardly just added them to the page. And on the next show, we will design this page a little bit better. Another mock-up, but we'll at least get some things laid out where they look nice before we decide on a final UI for it. In that process, we will also add some more drop-down behaviors and maybe start moving some things into a database. So while we're on this topic, I just pushed everything up to GitHub, and what's nice about the GitHub page is I've done a little bit of work there off the show that you guys might not know about. So if you are interested in playing with this app or seeing how it was built, I started a wiki, and the wiki page has some resources in it, and this will expand as we build the app. But right now I'm using GenFu, so I put a link to that in there. There are links to the streams. And then I have some other resources that we'll be using in the application, like this article on space launch sites, so facilities around the world. We're going to use this to help build out our database. So these are all launch locations, and we can take these launch locations and put them in a database and have actual live data instead of just Earth, Moon, and Mars and all this gibberish in our destinations. We will actually have names and descriptions in there, and this article will at least steer us in the right direction to make that happen. So I am building out the wiki and the project together. You can find those things on my GitHub page and on my website. So there's a link to my main GitHub page. Also, my website is by the same, by my name. So I've got edsharpeno.com, or blazorpro.com will get you there as well. I'll start posting some stuff in here, but you can get to all of my links up here at the top, whether it's Twitter, GitHub, SoundCloud, for Eat Sleep Code podcast, which I just released a new podcast today. I'm getting down a rabbit hole, but there is a brand new podcast out today on using .NET Core on the desktop, where I got to interview some nice folks from Microsoft. So edsharpeno.com has all those links for you. We will end the show today here and pick this up on Monday and start working on those forms. Now, before we finalize this show, we need to go raid somebody. We need to go spread our audience to somebody that is streaming right now. We've got Chef Brent. I don't know if he's cooking or coding. Let's see what Chef Brent is up to. Let me run this in the background here. Looks like Chef Brent is on stream with, is that Jeff? Oh no, he's wearing a hat. I thought he was Fritz for a moment. So let's go jump into Chef Brent's stream and see how he is doing. So I'm going to pull up the raid here. Make sure you say hi to Chef Brent. He's from Twilio. Brent is from Twilio, and he works with Corey, who was in the chat room earlier, and we're going to go jump into his show with a raid. So we'll see you all next Monday. Have a good weekend.